video, and I think that we all can identify with going to the promised land at least once a year. I think we all go to the same promised land, and maybe we don't all go every year together, but I think we all been to this promised land at least once a year together. And I'm not talking about Easter, I'm not talking about Christmas, I'm not talking about your birthday. I'm talking about tax season. Tax season. Tax season is a time when we get to the promised land, right? We get a big check. We feel full. Feel like everything's great. The love relationship's going a little bit better. The work relationship's going a little bit better. Everything is going a little bit better when we make it to that promised land for taxes. Then spring break comes and we lend some of it out. Then summer vacation. Buy a few more things that we like. Tires go out on the car. While the car's in the shop, they come back and let you know that the transmission is no good. Christmas comes. And before we know it, we go from a promised land, a full promised land of milk and honey and money to pay the bills, and we feel so good about it. Till we find ourselves at the end of that same year. Not only have we emptied out the promise, but now we're broken. Because you have to break the credit cards out now to pay for Christmas.
Right.
And in the span of 1 year, we go from the promised land back to slavery of debt. If you can identify with any of what I just talked about, this sermon series is for you. Last week we talked about overcoming our fears and allowing us to go and take the promised land. This week we're going to talk about possessing the promised land. Possessing the promised land. It's the difference between getting the income tax check and needing it again the following year.
Right.
Last week, we left the children of Israel in Numbers. And it's in Numbers where the children of Israel are given an opportunity to go into the promised land. And instead of taking that opportunity, they decide not to go. They decide that they don't trust God enough to get them through the promised land. The same God that got them through Egypt, that took them through the Red Sea, now they don't trust him enough to get them over the giants that they've seen inside of the valley. And so God punishes them. He says, since you didn't trust me, I tell you what, you'll never see the promised land. He sends them back to the wilderness, and he will not allow them to come to the promised land. And they have to stay there 40 years. 1 year for every day that they went to spy the land. Now, during this time, 40 years, is when the book of Deuteronomy is written. During these 40 years, all the children that were born to these Israelites that he brought out of Egypt are growing up. They have no idea. They never saw Egypt. They had no idea of what happened in Egypt. And what God is doing is, over a 40-year period, he's allowing for all the disobedient parents, all the people who did not trust him, who did not go into the promised land, to die off. And Deuteronomy is literally the second law. It is exactly the same thing that's inside of Exodus. The word Deuteronomy means, deutero means second, and anomy means law. So it literally means second law. And one of the first things that I learned as I began to read this story is God has no grandchildren. Just children. Exodus was for the fathers. Deuteronomy is for the children. So we never make our way to God based on something that somebody else did before us. Amen. We also learn, as we begin to look at Deuteronomy, that you can pass between these different places. You can move from the promised land to the wilderness, to slavery, and back and forth. It's a state of mind. It's more than just a land. It's a place of being. The promised land is the place where you're at the happiest point of your life, where you are receiving the blessings from God. The promised land may apply to different things in your life. There's a promised land for your finances. There's a promised land for your relationships. There's a promised land for your children. You can be in one promised land financially, and your children can be going awry. But when we look at these 40 years in the wilderness, the entire time this new generation is there with Moses. And he's feeding them. For 40 years, he's explaining every law. He's explaining every commandment. But more importantly, he's explaining the love of God. He's teaching them what it means to be in a relationship with God. He's getting them ready for a covenant, for a marriage. What do we learn from the wilderness? I think the first lesson that we learn from this wilderness experience is that we must possess the promised lands in our lives. If you look inside of Deuteronomy, you'll see the word possess everywhere you see promise. Anytime it talks about the promised land, the command is that we possess it. In other words, the promises are out there for us, but it requires for us to do something in order to get them. Now check this out. He talks about the promised land and possessing the promised land 40 times in the book of Deuteronomy. 40 times. There's only 34 chapters. He talks about the possessing the promise in 25 of the 34 chapters of Deuteronomy. This possession of the promised land, this thing that he's telling us about, it is the most important theme of the book of Deuteronomy besides the law and loving God. The second lesson we learn from the wilderness is that possession means to claim, but it also means to keep. Think about what we just talked about with finances. It's one thing to claim the promised land. You can get to the promised land. People win the lottery, and they get the promised land. But 90% of the people who win the lottery end up broke within 5 years. To possess something is bigger than if you can claim it. Can you keep it? Think about our jobs. Think about jobs. You know, it's one thing to get the best job, the promised job, that thing that God has for you. But can you keep it? The family. It's one thing to get married, but can you keep that thing going? It's one thing to have children, but can you keep them? Can you keep them rooted in God? I know when God first started talking to Ashaka and I about moving to Charlotte and starting a ministry, we knew we were headed to the promised land. felt good about Charlotte. We got here, we felt, oh my God, this is the perfect place for us. But it required for us to get here and keep it. He moved us. He gave us another job, but we had to go into that job and work hard. He gave us a new life without our close relatives, but we had to figure out ways to become one and to make sure that the family that we had could withstand the change. Third thing that we learn from the wilderness is that God gives you the power to possess the promised land. Look with me at Deuteronomy chapter 9. We're going to stay between chapter 9 and chapter 30. So look at chapter 9, starting at the first verse. He says, listen, Israel. Today you are about to cross the Jordan to go and drive out nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities fortified to the heavens. Listen, some of the things that you guys are getting ready to do, there are going to be obstacles in place that are greater and stronger than you. But look at verse 2. He says, the people are strong and tall, the descendants of Achan. You know about them and you have heard it said about them, who can stand up against the sons of Achan? Now, as you move into your promised land, you're going to hear a lot of people telling you about things that you're not able to do. It's so hard to start a business. It's hard to move out into that record deal and to get into the industry. It's hard to start a family. It's hard to get married. Men, they don't even want to get married no more. How am I going to find somebody out there? I'll tell you how. But understand that today, the Lord your God will cross over ahead of you as a consuming fire. He will devastate and subdue them before you. You will drive them out and destroy them swiftly, as the Lord has told you. Listen, what he's telling us here, it's already done. The promise has already been taken care of. All you got to do is move forward in your destiny. All you got to do is move towards your promise and go and claim it and possess it. Fourth thing that we learned in the wilderness is possessing the promised land. It's not about you. Look down at verses 4 through 6. When the Lord your God drives them out before you, do not say to yourself, the Lord brought me in to take possession of the land because of my righteousness. Lord have mercy. Because I'm all that. I got the job because of what school I went to, who my parents were. Instead, the Lord will drive out the nations before you because of their wickedness. You are not going to take possession of the land because of your righteousness or your integrity. You're not good enough for the promises that God is giving you. You can't work and get them. He said, instead, the Lord, your God, will drive out these nations before you because of their wickedness. And in order to keep the promise he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, understand that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. Why is that important? Why is that important? Because if the goal is to possess the promise, that means that you're not going to just get it, but you're going to keep it. Then you've got to understand it's not about you. It's about God. If your marriage is going to make it, you've got to understand, it's not about you and that person you're married to. But it's about allowing the world to see the glory of God in union between a husband and a wife. If you're going to spend the time needed to raise your children and get them to the place that you need them to be, you got to recognize it's not about you. It's not about that lady that you're estranged from. You have a responsibility, and that is to bring God glory through being a father to your children. It's not about us. And when we put the attention on who it's about, which is God, we're able to possess and keep the promise. It's not until we start worrying about ourselves that we start to mess up. It's not until we start thinking about what we're going to lose that we start to make manipulative decisions and we start moving stuff around instead of letting God come in and do what He has to do. And before you know it, you created a web of lies that you can't even remember the truth. And you destroyed yourself in the process. And the fifth lesson that we learn from the wilderness is that the promised land is here and now. Go with me over to chapter 30, Deuteronomy. Look at verse 11. Let me get that, say amen. This command that I give you today is certainly not too difficult or beyond your reach. It's not in heaven, so that you have to ask, who will go up and get it for us and proclaim it to us so that we may follow it. It's not across the sea, so you don't have to ask who will cross the sea to get it for us and proclaim it to us so that we may follow it. But the message is very near you, in your mouth, in your heart, so that you may follow it. See, today I have set before you life and prosperity, death and adversity. For I am commanding you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in His ways, and to keep His commandments, statutes, and ordinances, so that you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God may bless you in the land you are entering to possess. The promises are here and now. They're right here. They're ready for us to possess them. If you're in the wilderness in any part of your life, now is the day when you can come back to the promised land. We don't have to wait until we're gone to glory in order to see the promised land. The promised land is right here and right now in our lives. I'd like to borrow a quote from Luther, the great Luther. I'm not talking about Martin Luther. I'm talking about Luther Vandross. He says, here and now. This is a relationship between God, and He promised to love you faithfully. He says, here and now, you are all that I need. If you understand that here and now, the reality is that we can move into the promised land, you will drive toward it. But sometimes we just feel like promises are not for us right now. I know what it says about marriage. I know what it says about my children. But Minister Means, you don't know my situation. Yes, I do. So I got one thing for you. I just want you to take one thing home, and that is how how to possess the promised land for your life. That's what this whole discussion is about today. It's about you being able to leave here today and move into a promised land in every area of your life. The first thing we have to do to possess the promised land in our lives is right there in verse 15 through 18. He says, see, today I have set before you life and prosperity, death and adversity. For I am commanding you today to love the Lord your God. First thing we got to do is love God. We got to put him first. We got to show love. And then I like what Moses does here, because he don't just tell us to go and do something and leave it up to us to figure it out. He says, the way that you love God, by walking in his ways, by keeping his commandments, his statutes, his ordinances, so that you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God may bless you in the land you are entering to possess. You gotta love God. And I know sometimes we get into talking about following God's law, and we get into this discussion around legalism, and we're saved by grace. This is not about going to heaven. This is about right now. And I challenge you today, I challenge you to follow any place in your life where you do not necessarily feel that you're in the promised land. And if you follow it to its core, there is a commandment that if you were to apply to your life, would eliminate your problem. I challenge you today. I challenge you. I said, for any situation where you're in and you feel that the promise is not there, I challenge you today. Follow it to the original issue and see if you can't find the solution that will move you into the promised land, not just to claim it, but to possess it for your life in God's word. The second thing we have to do is we have to choose to possess the promised land. Look at verse 19. I call heaven and earth as a witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curse. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. Lord have mercy. Possessing the promised land starts with a choice. Possessing the promised land in your life today starts with one choice. Choose life. Choose to follow God. Choose to trust God. Choose to do the things that he has required you to do. Choose to love God. Choose to honor him. Choose to dedicate your family to him. Choose to dedicate every portion of your life to God. And get ready to move forward into your promised land. And the third thing, and the final thing, is right there in verse 20. It says, love the Lord your God, obey him, and remain faithful to him, for he is your life, and he will prolong your life in the land the Lord swore to give to your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Final thing we have to do to possess the land, claim it and keep it. We got to spend some time listening to God. We got to spend some time with him in our busy schedules, in our days, in our relationships. We've got to figure out ways to incorporate God into our lives outside of an hour on Saturday. We've got to find God in everything that we do. As we walk, we've got to open our ears and listen to God. As we talk with people, we have to receive God's word through them. We have to spend time understanding what God will have us do. Let me tell you why that's so important. So many times we're going after a promised land, but it ain't ours. So many times we're going after a person and he or she ain't ours. So many times we're going after a job, a career, and it ain't ours. And the reason why we are not able to determine whether or not we're going in the right direction, whether or not we are moving toward the promised land, is because we're not spending enough time with God, listening to Him. God will speak to you through your children. He will speak to you through the radio. He will speak to you as you walk down the street. But you have to be listening in order to hear His voice. So, there are three ways that we have to possess the promised land. When I say possess, I mean to claim it and keep it. We got to love God. We got to, first of all, we got to choose, make the determination that we want to be in the promised land, and we're going to do whatever it takes. And then finally, we have to listen and follow God. But let me show you this real quick. When you make that determination in your promised land, God picks you up, that wilderness or that slavery situation that you're in, and it takes some time. It pulls you back out. And let me tell you something. This ain't always an easy process. Sometimes there's some pain involved in God reshaping you. Then He breathes into you. And He makes you whole again. But not just that. Then He pours the blessing back into you. And He fills you up. He moves you into your promised land. But the beautiful thing I like about it, He protects you. Amen. Amen. I challenge each of you today. Whatever that thing that you've been thinking about the entire time I've been preaching, whatever that aspect of your life that you're getting ready to move into the promised land for, I challenge you today to apply these three small steps to it. Just focus on that one thing. Don't try and go out and do everything tomorrow. Just start with that one thing and move yourself into the promised land. Amen. To God be the glory. Amen. We want to say thank you for coming to our site and listening to one of our sermons. I want to invite you to come back as often as you would please. We also want to become a partner with you. So tell 7 people about this sermon. And also go out to our website and consider sowing a seed into our ministry by giving online or purchasing an item, maybe even an Uplift t-shirt, a coffee mug, or a sweatshirt at our online store. I want to say thank you, and we pray that God bless you. Amen.